I'm reminded of two baptism stories that I want to tell you. I don't have many more chances to tell you these stories, but having Jet here with us, it reminded me that when Jet was dedicated, this is a 70s reference. Cheryl will get this, Karen, a few others, Jeanette. But when Jet was dedicated, Sherry and her daughter and son-in-law brought their twins, whose names are Sadie and Benny. And as far as I know, I am the only pastor in history that got to dedicate Benny and the Jets on the same day. Look it up, Google it, Benny and the Jets. The second thing that I'm reminded of today is Carly is here. And when Carly was baptized, well, when I first came here, they instructed me that there were duck waders. You know what that is? Where you put waders to go duck hunting, and they come up about here. They said, these waders are here, so you can just put them on and you don't have to take your suit off. And you can baptize and then come out and take off the waders, come right back out here. And I said, oh, okay. So the first Sunday I did that, whoever I was baptizing, the water splashed up over the waders, or I didn't have them on right or tight, I don't know. And my suit pants got drenched. And so I put on my clergy robe, which I never wore, and I came out, and I don't know what the church thought. They thought, well, he's dressing up today, and I just wore the clergy robe. So never again did I trust that. I always took my suit off, but I kept putting the duck waders on. And when it was Carly's turn, I came out. She said, why are you wearing those duck waders? I said, I don't know. The deacons told me to do this. And she said, Pastor, I think the deacons are messing with you. They're back there. Every time you come out, these duck waders, they're going, hey, the idiot did it again. So I don't wear the duck waders anymore. On Wednesday night at our online Bible study, the name of Satchel Paige came up. And it made me remember a story. And so I went on ESPN's site and I saw that they told this story. And so I listened to it again because it really illustrates what I want to say this morning. If you don't know who Satchel Paige was, that's okay. Satchel Paige was an African-American pitcher back in the 30s and 40s and even into the 50s, even into the 60s. He was the dominant pitcher of his era, but because of discrimination, Satchel Paige was not allowed into the Major League Baseball because he was African American. He played in the Negro Leagues, which were full of players that would have dominated the major leagues had they been able to get in. Satchel Paige there, they finally let him in. So at the age of 42 in 1948, he became the oldest rookie ever to enter Major League Baseball. Still holds that record. He played baseball in the major leagues until 2 months before his 60th birthday, and then he retired, making him the oldest baseball player in history in the major leagues, a record that probably will never be broken. But my story this morning occurred when he was traveling in the off-season with a team that they called the Satchel Paige All-Stars. And in the 1936, they were in Denver, Colorado. To make extra money, they would travel around in the off-season and play semi-pro teams. And in Denver, they had a semi-pro team that was sponsored by the Coors Brewing Company. And so they played, and Satchel Paige's reputation was known far and wide. And so the first kid that got up to bat for the Coors Brewing Company, he said, I'm going to hit this ball, I'm going to swing so hard, and my shoes are going to fall off. And that's what he did. And he got the bat on the top of the ball, and it rolled down the third base line, and he made it to first base safely. When he got on, another player from the Coors team got on top of the dugout and yelled a racial slur at Satchel Paige and then said, you're overrated. So Satchel Paige turned to his first baseman, a guy named Buck O'Neill, another tremendous baseball player, and he said, Buck, bring him in. And so Buck turned to the outfield and motioned for them to come in 2 or 3 steps, which is not an unusual occurrence in baseball. But Satchel Paige says, no, bring them all the way in. And Buck understood that Satchel wanted the field cleared. And so everybody, the base people, first, second, third, shortstop, left field, center field, right field, they all came off the field. And all was left was Satchel Paige and the catcher. And in 9 pitches, he struck out the side. And the whole Coors team ran out and gathered around to congratulate and publicly admit, you are the greatest pitcher of our generation. It's the only time I know of in baseball where one player took on another team all by himself in a full inning. He stood alone. He had no peers, no companions, no teammates. No one was like him, one of a kind. That's okay in that kind of a story. But the Pharisee has that impression about himself. You hear what he said? When he goes up to the temple to pray, he looks up to God and says, I am like no one else. I am like no one else. I have no peers, no companions, no teammates. I'm one of a kind. I'm set apart. What did he mean by that? Did he possibly mean that he was not flesh and bones like other people? William Shakespeare wrote the famous The Merchant of Venice, and in that he had a character named Shylock. Shylock was Jewish, and he was mistreated by his Christian neighbors. And in one of the pivotal scenes, Shylock says these words. He turns to his Christian neighbors and says, we're the same, we're the same. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not seek revenge? Did the Pharisee mean that he didn't bleed when he was pricked or that he didn't giggle when he was tickled? No, that's not what he meant. Did he mean he didn't have to work like everybody else, that he didn't have to eat and sleep and struggle and feel pain? In her famous Ain't I a Woman speech, Sojourner Truth tackled this very theme, and she said, no, everybody has to eat. Men, women, black, white, the whole world experiences some things the same. Hear her words. She says, look at me, look at my arms. I have plowed and planted and gathered in the barns, and no man can head me. Ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and I bared the lash as well as any. Ain't I a woman? She's saying women and men experience things very similarly, just as good as one another. She's also saying that all human beings, they have to eat, they have to work, and they feel pain. All these things go on in all folks. Did the Pharisee mean he didn't do that? That he didn't have to work? That he didn't feel pain? That he didn't need sleep? He didn't need food? No, I don't think that's what he meant. What he meant was that he concluded his piety made him better than the whole world. That he was better than anybody. He was not like anybody. He felt that no one was as good as he, no one was as righteous as he. He had no peers. He had no companions. He had no mates. He stood alone. That's an illusion. That's an illusion that sometimes religion gives us, that we're better than the rest of the world, that we're different than everybody else, that we are more righteous. And we have to get rid of that illusion to follow Jesus Christ. I loved Ruth's statement, I'm not that great a Christian. That's an understanding that, man, wouldn't that have been weird if I stood up here and Ruth had written, I am the only Christian in the world. I am better than all the rest of you slobs. That's why I'm coming in here to get baptized. I think you would have rioted or something, wouldn't you? At least shaking your head. No, he thought he was better. He also had another illusion. He had the illusion that everybody else was up to no good but him. Everybody else. He says, I'm glad that I'm not like everybody else. Adulterers, he said, rogues. He went on and listed all these things, tax collectors. Everybody else is up to no good. One of my dad's favorite songs was something by a guy named Don Gibson in the 60s. It was called Oh, Lonesome Me. And it starts off with these lines, everybody's going out and having fun. Me, I'm just a fool for staying home, and I'm having none. A bad mistake I'm making about just hanging around. I know that I should have some fun and paint the town. A lovesick fool that's blind and just can't see. Oh, lonesome me. Here, I think this guy is saying, I'm so special, so righteous, so devout. Oh, I'm like no other. And everybody else is out dancing with the devil. Yeah, they're having lots of fun. But me, I'm here in church, serving my God, doing what's right, being different than all the rest. His illusion even expanded to one more layer. He believed that his religious practices made him exceptional in the eyes of God, made him one of a kind. He says, I fast twice a week, and I tithe everything I own. No one required anybody to fast twice a week, not even the Pharisees. He's saying he tithes not only his income, but he tithes everything else, his livestock, his land, his provision, his food, his wealth, his inheritance. He tithes it all. Jesus said they were so faithful that they tithed even the herbs and spices in their pantry. The guy says, because I'm religious, I'm just exceptional. I'm like nobody else. Certainly not like the rest of the world. It's so horrible. He separated himself from others. Now, I don't know. He might have been a little bit of exaggeration. Maybe Jesus exaggerated this guy. I don't know too many people that are just like this guy, but I do recognize myself in him to an extent. Maybe you recognize yourself to an extent that sometimes I think that my righteousness exceeds a few others. I can name you a few, but I won't do it today. And raising up, I've always kind of felt like everybody else at school and in my peer group, they were always rowdy and having fun and partying, and here I was back in church one more time. And maybe you feel, here I am in church, and I know there's folks running around doing no good, and here I am, I'm better than all the rest. I'm one of a kind. I don't have any peers. Maybe that sometimes crosses your mind. The Pharisee's not the only one in the Bible that it crosses his mind. When we meet Elijah one time when he's really exhausted and tired and disappointed, he tells the Lord, I alone am serving you now. And God said, I got thousands of people serving me. And then remember Peter on the night before Jesus was crucified, he goes up to Jesus and says, if all these other buzzards leave you, I will stand true. I alone will be there. Of course, he was not there. That's a very difficult, unhappy attitude to have. It's a non-Christian attitude. It's the one the Pharisee had. Maybe he didn't have all these thoughts. Maybe been a little bit short. I remember several years ago there was a team down in Houston, Chaplain, named the Houston Oilers. They changed their names. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't want to work with oil anymore. But the Houston Oilers, and they had this very colorful coach. His name was Bum Phillips. And after a game in which his running back, Earl Campbell, just ran all over the other team, they went up to Bum and they said, Bum, what do you think of Earl Campbell? And he said, well, he may not be in a class by himself, but it don't take long to call the roll. Maybe in his humblest moments, the Pharisee realized, I'm not in a class by myself. But he also thought it doesn't take long to call the roll. And maybe that's more like you and me. We don't really believe we're super pious above all other people, but it doesn't take long to call the roll. We're in a small group, we feel. That's not the way to be, because it separates us not only from one another, it separates us from God. That tax collector, he did not have that attitude. He saw himself as just one in the crowd, just one more sinner. He wouldn't even stand next to the Pharisee. Maybe he didn't think he was worthy, or maybe he didn't want to hear the Pharisee's criticism, so he stands way away from him, and he looks up and he beats his chest and he says, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. I'm just one of a crowd. I'm like everybody else, in need of the grace and forgiveness of God. Have mercy on me, a sinner. I like the fact that the guy went to the temple. Sometimes the tax collector in us can become so overwhelmed with our sin. We don't want to be in church. We don't want to be around righteous people. We don't want to be around church folk. We don't want to be around the Bible. We feel so miserable and so shameful and so guilty. We just stay away from it all. But no. We need to be right in the center of God's people when we are most aware of our sinfulness, not separated, not alone, but to be one of the crowd, one of the crowd that stand in need of God's mercy. I love what our vision committee has written. I didn't write this vision statement that's in the bulletin, but I love what they wrote, and I encourage that. He says, we invite you, whatever your race, nationality, sexual orientation, gender identity, relationship status, differing abilities, whether immigrant or refugee, young or old, to join us. I love the last phrase, to join us, to join us. The Pharisee would have had nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing. He doesn't want to join anybody. He wants to stand alone. I don't have any peers. I don't have any community. I am special. The Pharisee would have walked away. Even if the vision committee would have said, come and learn to be like us. Come and let us teach you who you need to be. Come and try to get as good as the rest of us. Even that, the Pharisee would have said, I'm out, I'm out. But this passage, this vision statement says, come join with us. Come be one of the crowd. The tax collector would have stood up and said, you mean there's some place that will take me and let me be part of the worshiping community and love my Jesus? I want to go to that place. Amen? On Christmas Eve, one of the young adults that grew up in this church came up to me and said, I heard your sermons where you said you thought people should be welcomed and affirmed in the church regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. She said, I played that for my friends at school, at college, and they said, my goodness, wow, we'd go back to church if our pastor thought that way. We'd go back to church if our pastor thought that way, if our church said that. But our church is always telling us who is banned, who's not worthy, who's not wanted. We don't want any part of that anymore. You see, we all stand together. Do you hear that? We all stand together. We're all just one of the crowd, standing in the need of prayer and the grace and mercy of God. And we join with one another in that place. I've been talking a lot to some of my colleagues who had more money than I, and they retired earlier than I, or they were older. Some of them just, they're old coots. And some of them had other things to do, and they went and started doing that. But I asked them, now that you're not pastoring a church, what do you miss most? What do you miss? I'm trying to prepare myself. You understand? I'm trying to get ready for what's about to happen, and probably won't succeed. So I said, what do you miss most? And, they miss the preaching every once in a while. They miss the community of faith, the friends and folks there. They miss the challenge of trying to grow a healthy church. But they also said one more thing that I didn't expect. They said, when you retire, here's the biggest change. When you're the pastor of a church, every room you walk into, somebody says, Reverend, so good to have you. Reverend, here's your seat. You sit over here. Reverend, we're hoping you came. You're so busy. Thank you for being here. And you get nothing but honor and respect and deference. And it's so beautiful. I mean, you just love that. And then the minute you retire, you walk into a room and they go, who are you? Who are you? This is John, one of the crowd. No honor, no deference. But isn't that the way it's supposed to be, y'all? Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? We see ourselves not as one of a kind, with no peers, no companions, no teammates, no equals. No, that's not the way. For when we see ourselves that way, we not only separate ourselves from others, we separate ourselves from God. For at the end of this parable, Jesus said, the tax collector went home forgiven, justified. The other one, who just read his resume to God, did not. We are all one of the crowd, standing in the need of prayer by God's grace. Amen.